My name's Remy. I've been at the Economist nearly 8 years. Started off in agile delivery, but wasn't very good at that, and ended up in product. That's the way things go. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how engagement with our audio products forms a loyal customer, and the kind of things we do and the kind of things we see. So this is more really applying into our product development and how we look at our customers, the kind of sort of the processes and the things that Henna talked about. So I'm going to start off with a question: who listened to a podcast today? Oh, we got a good distribution. Then the other question, I think, is going to be a bit skewed given the audience. Who's got a smart speaker like a Alexa or a Google Home? Well, that's okay. Okay. So the Economist, as I said, we've been around for 176 years. Started off as a newspaper. We still are a newspaper. We call ourselves a newspaper despite the fact that there's only one edition a week. And we sort of came in place when the Corn Laws were introduced, and our founder was outraged about that and started this liberal newspaper. And ever since, it's really sort of morphed into still a liberal newspaper that does a lot around advocacy around topics that we feel really passionate about. If it's climate change, if it's gay marriage, legalizing drugs, all sorts of things. We've been producing audio for an awful long time. So since 2006, we've been dabbling with audio formats on and off. And then in 2012, we really established Economist Radio, which sort of pulls together all of the audio outputs that we generate and makes it available via different ways. And why is that important for us? So engagement really matters these days to publications. I'm mindful that I'm the only publication between two finance speakers, so just wanted to give a slightly different angle on that as well. We're very much in the a player in the attention economy, right? There's lots of distractions these days. People's attention spans are getting less and less and less, and I'd love this graph to sort of say what a minute on the internet in 2019 was spent on, and the numbers are staggering if you see what people have been doing. And it's important for us to sort of still try to compete within that economy, because the more people use our products, and also via different kind of channels, so omni-product usage is important as well, but mainly frequency is the more often they use our products, the more they realize the value that it gives them. And if it's quite a difficult sort of proposition when you're a newspaper that only releases an edition once a week. You've only got once a week to talk to your customers. So we have to change that in different ways. But besides frequency, the moment of engagement and the duration of the engagement is also really, really important. So if I engage with you at a time that you don't actually have time, or you don't have that much time, I'm much more likely to have not a very meaningful engagement, and we really, really sort of need to look at that. So just to give you a very quick overview of the kind of things we do. So one of the things that I absolutely was blown away by when I joined The Economist is our narrated newspaper. So it's the audio edition, basically. And you have to keep in mind that on Wednesdays, editorial works until midnight when they have the deadline. Then it gets all shipped off to the printers. All shipped off to the editors. It all gets checked, fact-checked. And then on Thursday around sort of midday, everything will be ready. And sort of as pages are ready, we feed them to our audio production company, and they have a small army of sort of voice actors that now start to read out these things. And they've got pronunciation experts, and they got all sorts of things. And within 5 hours, they basically read out 92 pages every single week without fail. And at like 7 o'clock in the evening, it's now available in our digital products. We launched a morning briefing product, just like every other media outlet, back in 2014, which is branded Espresso. And we've actually, after doing a bit of text-to-speech with that, now found a production company that can do the same thing. It's a lot shorter, it's a lot less content, and can produce that in about an hour each day. And we're actually distributing that only via sort of smart speakers at the moment. So if you open up your Alexa when you get home and you look at sort of news providers for the flash briefing in Alexa, you'll find us in there, and you can ask your Alexa for the latest news. You'll get our Espresso product. And then podcasts have been around for quite some time. We've mainly done sort of weekly or fortnightly ones, but last year we launched The Intelligence, which is our daily podcast, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And for us, that is really about brand awareness. So it's at the moment all freely available. There's quite a lot of money and quite a lot of effort that goes into it. So we are sort of rethinking that. But it is great for sort of brand discovery and content discovery and brand awareness in general. So quickly touching on where you can actually get all of these things. So first of all, in our mobile apps. So The Economist on mobile, we say it's our new app. But what we're basically doing is consolidating everything that The Economist produces into a single mobile experience. So previously we had a very fragmented sort of ecosystem. Audio content over here, written content over there, films over there. And we're now trying to sort of really get all the different formats to come together. And also trying to build in some interesting features to get people sort of hooked on using our products. And I think one of the things that news outlets really struggle with is the concept of storing value in a product. You get people to come back to your product and make it irreplaceable if there's a particular kind of value for them stored in it. And one of the things we know from our customer research is that most Economist readers or listeners are like ritualists. They will always listen to the same sections in the same order. So what we're introducing later this year is a playlist feature. You can sort of say, these are the kind of sections that I want to listen to pretty much every week. And just like your Spotify Discover Weekly, once the issue has been published, it's all there waiting for you. And we'll even download it to your device. So if you're on the tube, you can still listen to it. And then a completely different angle for how we use our audio products. So we have a product called Global Business Review out in the Chinese market. And that's really aimed as a news product, but also as an educational product, where you have sort of paragraph by paragraph translation capabilities. You can tap and hold and then change the English text to Chinese or the other way around. But then recently we also introduced sort of the English features to go with it. So you can read it in English or read it in Chinese, and you can hear the perfect BBC voice actor pronunciation of the English words and sort of really help that to hone your skills. And what do our subscribers tell us? Well, they love it. For a lot of people, that once they sort of find it, it's the only way they consume Economist content. And for a lot of people, it's quoted as a real reason for them to subscribe every year. And then how does it work for us? Because it's clearly it's a value exchange between us and our customers. And it's actually, the data really shows that new subscribers that we acquire, that in the first sort of 10 weeks, discover the audio feature and actually listen to some of our content, are much more likely to stay with us than people that don't. What is important to keep in mind is that at the moment, and it's changing rapidly, but we were running with a sort of 12 for 12 format that a lot of you will probably have seen around sort of train stations and other transport hubs. And sort of within those 12 weeks, we know that weeks 9 and 10 are really important in whether or not someone stays with us after the trial period, or if they actually they find that the product is not for them and they move on. And quickly on some stuff around podcasts. So very interesting trends from one of our research agency that sort of shows that the consumption of radio, so listening to the radio, is actually declining at the moment. Streaming music, i.e. Spotify, is staying relatively flat. It's not growing anymore. But what you do see come up all of a sudden is people listening to podcasts more and more and more. And funny enough, it's not actually thing that happens in the UK or the US only. It's something that is being predicted to sort of go global. So as you can see from this quite busy graph, it's sort of come 2026, the market share of podcasts in, say, Asia Pacific will be just as important for us to worry about as it is elsewhere. Podcast audiences are also very different from the typical Economist audience, which is very interesting for us to sort of think about, because we do struggle a little bit with the traditional sort of Economist reader getting older and older and older, and us not having really found ways to replenish them. So The intelligence, as we talked about, launched last year, and it's 5 days a week, 20 to 25 minutes each episode. And keep that in mind, because that actually is quite important, and why this works well. Other things with podcasts, which is why it makes it, the product is the content rather than you can really build a product around it, is because it gets consumed off platform so much. Like most of it is all via iTunes. And there's no real customer engagement that you can do in your own products. And most importantly, from an audience point of view for us, it's a much younger audience. Really the 12 to 24-year-olds have really sort of picked up their podcast consumption in the last couple of years, and therefore it allows us to reach an audience that we would otherwise not reach. So just some numbers. Economist Radio sort of really grown. The rapid growth is obviously driven by the daily podcast, by introducing that daily frequency. We really saw more and more people starting to listen to it. And if you then look at the unique listens, you sort of see that there's an interesting pattern developing. And that pattern is that we've actually managed to form this habit for people. It's like they discovered the content, they've downloaded one episode, and now all of a sudden we see them download the podcast, the daily podcast, nearly on a daily basis and listen to them. So it really becomes an integral part of what they do. And we've been really pondering about why, and we're going back to sort of the moment and duration. So the duration is 20 to 25 minutes. I'll probably, I don't know, my commute is quite sort of broken up in segments, but say that the longest segment of my commute is about 20 to 25 minutes. Or if you're preparing food in the evening, 20 to 25 minutes sounds about reasonable. Or when you go to the gym and do a workout, 20 to 25 minutes might sound like you're a bit lazy, but it sounds reasonable. So you start to sort of see that the length of that podcast and the frequency in which we release it is actually creating that habit. There's a strong correlation between those two things. And then finally, quickly sort of talking about smart speakers and voice assistants. So one of the wonderful things of my role is that I also get to play with new technology. So we've realized quite a while ago that we need to stay in touch with what the Googles and the Apples and the Amazons are doing, because it's going to change consumption of content massively, right? And we've been very lucky to work with the likes of Google for quite some time on beta programs and better understanding how customer behavior is changing, and that's most visible on our smart speaker and voice assistant presence. So apparently there's a real cool trick with calendars where you can get the two to talk to each other, and you should Google that video, it's really interesting. But it's no longer a gadget, right? I mean, there were, I think about 40% of the people in the audience have one at home. And in the US, the stat is actually for the US, a quarter of the population now has one at home, and quite a lot of people have multiple, so they're dotted around rooms. And Amazon is like, it's the fastest selling product every single Black Friday for quite a few years in a row now. And they really sort of fit into that pattern that we already talked about, that the moment and the duration needs to be right. So I have one in my kitchen. I use it predominantly to set timers, but also to listen to things while I'm cooking. That's exactly the kind of sort of use case that these things are really being used for now. But also, Amazon specifically, but Google as well, they're really trying to have you form habits. Like they've got these things like routines where you can link multiple things together. So I can set up a routine that gives me the weather, how long my commute is going to be, and automatically plays a morning briefing for me, which is one voice command. But the other thing that is really, really interesting that we see now emerge is voice assistants learning about sort of your habits and your context. So we already spoke about the routines and sort of having that, but then that becoming automated as well, where sort of based on what I'm at the time of invocation or the time that I the length that I listen to something that can then inform other things. So what we've been seeing and what we've been working on with Google is a different kind of behavior where you start almost like you start listening to a radio station. And because it doesn't know at the very beginning of the interaction whether or not you got a lot of time or not a lot of time, it starts with smaller chunks of information. And as you listen, it goes like, seems like Remy's got a bit more time than I thought. And it slowly starts to feed you sort of longer listens as you go along because it works it out. You've got more time. And the other thing that is really interesting that we're currently sort of looking at around voice assistants is how they are placed within a different context. So talking to a car company that I won't name because they won't like it, but they will give us access to the built-in sat-nav system. So now all of a sudden I know how long you're going to be driving for, or if you use the sat-nav, or I can learn that on Monday mornings you're likely to drive for about 20 minutes, whilst on Wednesdays you've got a longer commute. And all of a sudden I can use that information to sort of say, okay, I can tailor a bit of a content program for you and service that for the duration of your drive. So wrapping that all up, and I've abused our famous sort of Big Mac index, which is sort of the famous cost of living index that the Economist has been publishing for quite some time, where we basically compare the cost of living based on the price of a Big Mac. The key takeaways: audio drives higher customer engagement. People love it when they find it, they'll use it, and it's good for people getting to come back to your product. Daily frequency and a suitable duration, again, really important, really helps forming that habit. And then for voice assistants, they'll be able to know us really well and tailor our experiences to us to really make sure that they give us that optimal customer experience. And that was it. Thank you very much.